Hello everybody, I am Steph Aduse and I am the creator of Black All Year, which is here to remind everyone that Black issues and challenges, their achievements and experiences happen all year round and not just in Black History Month, even though this happens to be Black History Month. If you've missed previous events, they're available on YouTube and as a podcast. And if you're watching or listening to this event after the event, please like and subscribe, as it makes sure you don't miss any future material and it helps others to find the content too. So I have been trying to get today's speaker onto Black All Year for a while, and finally we are here. So Beverley Powell is a seasoned transformation leadership coach and associate coach consultant, and she has a profound dedication to fostering transformational leadership among global majority nurses. She draws from her rich Jamaican heritage and brings over 22 years of expertise in the strategic equality, diversity and inclusion domain. As a value-driven coach, Beverley is deeply committed to her principles of social justice, radical self-care and inclusive leadership and empowerment. And she really does have a remarkable career, which has been marked by her ability to design and deliver inclusive leadership programs, which are tailored to senior leaders and have a profound impact. And believe me, that is no mean feat. Beverley's journey as an accredited life coach began a little while ago, 2005, and she's worked across the public and private sectors. And her strategic leadership has consistently delivered successful outcomes for individuals and for organisations. She notably coached a senior nurse of colour within the NHS into their very first senior leadership and management role, which really is a testament to her prowess in leadership development. And throughout her career, she's earned accolades for her unwavering commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion. So in 2007, her leadership and management work received formal recognition at a regional HMIP Race Equality Conference. She was commended by Professor Gus John. In 2014, Professor Udak Archibong of the University of Bradford acknowledged her contributions at their 4th annual conference, Making Diversity Interventions Count. And then in 2014 as well, Beverley was recognised as one of the top 50 Black, Asian and minority ethnic pioneers by the Health Service Journal for her pioneering work in the equality, diversity and inclusion arena. She's got lots of scholarly contributions, which include the research study, a critical analysis of the transgender experience when accessing primary and secondary care within the NHS. So ethnicity is not her only horse, and she's demonstrated real commitment to advancing healthcare. In 2022, Beverley took on the role as public governor for an NHS mental health trust, which really just shows how she is dedicated to accountability and policy review in senior leadership within the healthcare sector. And she just is a really inspirational, uplifting, positive person that I'm really pleased to have had the opportunity to talk to and that you're going to hear from today. And finally, I'll take a deep breath as Beverley squirms as we talk about her. Beverley has authored a fantastic book that is not quite out yet, but is going to be the topic of today's conversation. So Beverley, welcome.
Thank you, Steph. It's wonderful to be here. Yes, I do cringe a little bit and I think, my gosh, is that me? Did I do all this? Did I do all that? But yeah, thank you very much. Delighted to be here, finally, to be here, and so apt to be here during Black History Month and Black All Year. So thank you very much for inviting me.
No problem at all. It's as I said, you know, we have been trying for some time to get diaries coordinated and things. So it's an absolute delight to have you. So Beverley, tell us a little bit about, obviously that's your professional background that we've heard about, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your heritage, please.
A little bit about me. So I am of Jamaican heritage. My family, mother and father, came from Jamaica, from Clarendon, and arrived into the UK in Greater Manchester in the late 50s. So I'm a product of Jamaican heritage. and a product really of Greater Manchester. But I moved over into Yorkshire for work. So I'm fiercely proud of being from Greater Manchester, equally fiercely proud of being of Jamaican heritage as well.
Yeah. So both sides of that border that we've got. You went Lancashire to Yorkshire. That's brave lass. That's all I can say. So we said that you had that you've authored this book. Just remind me of the title, because the Burning the Superwoman Cape that is part of today's title is part of the title of your book, isn't it?
Yeah, that's part of the book, and also running alongside that is around leadership life lessons. So what it isn't is an autobiography. However, it's important that I put some context into some of the leadership and life lessons. There's so many books which I've seen out there over the water in America by some fabulous Black women authors, and equally some good books here in the UK. The authors tend to be based in London. And so I really wanted to put a slant on this because I think it's important, my heritage, for a number of reasons and a number of experiences that I personally experienced over the border in Greater Manchester during my time as a little girl. And a lot of that shaped me. I know that Maya Angelou has said in one of her books that you can refuse to be reduced by what has made you and shaped you. And some of these things have shaped me and made me the inclusive leader, values-led leader that I am. However, I haven't been reduced by that. One of the other reasons is that as a little girl, I would have loved to have read a book by somebody who had a similar heritage, who came from where I came from in Greater Manchester, who had similar experiences, and how they met with those challenges and how they got to where they are through their leadership career. So that's why I decided to do that. I know another Black author, woman author, Toni Morrison, says if there's a book there that you haven't read, and it's in you, then write it. And I've been playing around with this concept for a long time. And I decided, yes, that's what I want to do. I keep talking about various authors because I am touched by so many authors and have a library of books in so many different ways. I want to touch again on to Brené Brown, who talks about unraveling. The midlife crisis is not negative, but it's a form of unraveling some of the experiences that you have had and want to share. And that really touched me and was an impetus as well to get into writing this book. And it's just a form of unraveling. It's part of my leadership legacy. I think it's important to have something in terms of legacy. And this is what I just want to give back to anybody who it may touch on in any way. That's a long response to that.
No, I think it's great. And I think it's interesting what you were saying there about how experiences from when you were younger and growing up have formed you. And I think, we all know that's the case, that they're called your formative years for a reason. And how then as you grow and develop and you look back on them, you can choose. Maybe this is why I love what you put out on social media, because I feel very much that you can choose how you respond to that. And I think, for me, I do think that defines who I am, but I choose what that definition is. And that's kind of what I heard from you. I mean, tell us a little bit about that kind of your formative years. What kind of experiences, because we're roughly the same age, they're in the same ballpark. You grew up in Greater Manchester, so a slightly more ethnically diverse area than mine. But actually, when we were growing up, it wouldn't be anything like it is now.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about those experiences.
Sure. Well, I mean, without giving too much of my age away, my education was round about the time before the Race Relations Act. And so I had some not fantastic experiences in terms of my early years in school. And I write about that in my book, but I also look at the leadership life lessons and how I got through that. I've also been shaped by a number of things that have happened around Greater Manchester for me as a little girl, the Toxteth riots, the riots in Moss Side, as it was called back in the day, the reasons why, the tensions with the police and how that spilled out. And also I was shaped by the lack of role models and what I didn't see. What I didn't see as a little girl by my magazines, my comics, on TV, how people like me in the black body was portrayed. And equally, I would say that I am bicultural, because at home, my culture was staunchly Jamaican. I would go to church every Sunday. I'd march every year in white and proud, and I was equally told, and these were very early experiences of me being in a black body. I use that term because I'm currently reading the black author, psychotherapist Resmaa Menakem, who talks about being in the black body and the experiences, mind, body and soul, and healing that. But those experiences, I was told from first generation, was that you had to work twice as hard. Whatever you do in life, you will, not explicitly told you will never be accepted, but it was an experience that shaped me my early years to know that being in a black body, I would never be equated to the same as my white colleagues. And also growing up and hearing as a young girl, Jamaican little girl, hearing big people talk in the room, uncles and aunties talking about going back to Jamaica after the speech by Enoch Powell, the Rivers of Blood speech, and talking about how much we would get per family, what that would mean, where we would go. I have no control in this. I was a child born here, but of dual heritage, and hearing those conversations and knowing that I may go there shaped my thinking and what I understood at home, and the reality of life and what I heard and saw and was treated growing up, being in a black body. Yeah. And knowing the setting was that I would have to work twice as hard, and seeing my aunties, uncles, grandmother, mother, the hustle culture, 2 or 3 jobs, studying, working at night, working during the day to do all that. That's what shaped me. That's what shaped my resilience. That's what shaped my resolve. That's what shaped my commitment. But equally, I have stepped out of some of that and shaped myself without leaving my culture. But it's important for me when I write in the book to understand the context and the why and the years and what shaped me in my earlier formative years, and how I got to where I am now. So shaped by a number of, unfortunately, negative ways, but the plus is the strength of my mother and my grandmother. When I think about it, to leave one part of the world and come here to set up a beautiful country like Jamaica on the invitation, of course, by this country to come here, and what my aunties and uncles were met with, gosh, you know, it's just amazing and fantastic. And when I go back to further into my own heritage, I'm really diving into this stuff. It's around understanding that, you know, I'm a product of ancestors who for 250 years were shackled. I'm a product of slavery, who was shackled, raped, pillaged, worked more hours than anybody else, had their identity stripped away from them. My surname is a slave name. When I was transported, my ancestors transported, stripped from all identity. So that is the product, and it's important that I understand that for my own diversity, inclusion, and my identity, to never forget that. But equally, as I sit here before you, I have shaped myself. So I refuse to be reduced by some of those things, and some of those things have shaped me for the good.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I loved the when we were kind of talking, and I said, what's the title of your book? And you said about burning the Superwoman cape, and I love that imagery, because I think a lot of the things that you've talked about and in the promotion for this event, I talked about the quote, and it's Elizabeth Whitten, I think it's Elizabeth Whitten, who said that as a woman, you have to get half as much credit as a man, you have to work twice as hard and be twice as smart. And I think that's absolutely true. So I think that a lot of what you say in the book is actually relevant generally to women. But I think where that then gets shaped even further by our ethnicity is the fact that if it's twice as hard for a woman, it's at least 4 times as hard for a Black woman, because you've got that layer of exactly what you were hearing and being told. You have to be better. And if you're anything like me, it's almost like you have to be perfect. You can't make a mistake as a Black woman professionally, because if you do, then it's obviously a sign that you don't belong there. But also it's damaging for every other Black woman in that environment, because it's a kind of, see, we can't trust these people. And is that what you mean by the cape? It's that kind of, I've got to be all of these things.
There are a number of reasons why I use the analogy of the cape, and I use the analogy of the cape lots of times for women, but equally there's a double bond on the seams of the cape for a woman of colour. And there's one thing around thinking about what my family mother would say, that you have to be twice as good. Or when I was going to school on a Sunday, my shoes, uniform was polished, because I was told that I had to look twice as good to be treated the same. So I always knew that. So what that I felt over the years when I reflect on this is that a lot of my creativity, difference, anything that was different, I would throw a cape over that to be treated or want to be treated the same as. I didn't want to be seen as different. So I would use a cloak to hide and actually numb down a lot of things, pain, happiness, or whatever. I would numb that down because I felt that wasn't allowed. And to be treated differently. Don't laugh too loud, how I wear my hair, how I dress, stepping out of my true Beverley power and moving into a system which would appreciate and recognize me because I've dumb myself down. But what I've realized, having thrown away the cape over the last, certainly over during COVID, I decided to throw away the cape. What I've realized over that is that there's a health warning here, because when you throw away the cape, all the things that you dumb down will come to the surface, because I was always hiding behind the cape. Everything was fine. Everything's okay. Yes, I'll do that. Want to be wanted, needed, all that, and dumbing down. And I lost myself. The cape lost me. So I threw away the cape and decided to do that work. And that really meant some deep work of all the things that I have hidden away. And it does take an element, and I do write in the book, right at the beginning, there is a health warning here, that if you choose to do that, you do need the support of others if you've had professionals. So there's being trauma informed is a large part of my work. When I look at race, when I look at difference, being trauma informed and understanding that is super important, which is why the work of Resmaa Menakem and understanding race, racial trauma, the mind, body, and the heart it's deep work. There are exercises in there, but it's understanding the impact of trauma. And what I probably didn't realize was not getting in touch with myself. I'd numbed that down. And actually, there was a lot of stuff there. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff that I've realized. My creativity, my identity was part of my superpower. And I was dumbing myself down in this cloak, which I call superpower, superwoman, of my true identity. And so I rejoice now of me being me. And this, as Brené Brown talks about, this unraveling. And maybe it's at a time of my life where it's important to unravel. But equally, I recognize, whilst I do that, I'm a big fan of the author the Black feminist Audre Lorde, and Audre Lorde talks about taking radical self-care. It's super important as Black women, as women of colour. Radical self-care. I'm not talking about walking around the block. You've got to get radical with this stuff because it impacts on us so much more because of the system that we work in or live in, the access to services. We only have to look at health inequalities and how it impacts on certain particular protected characteristics. Why is that? When we deliver the same service, but we're impacted on regional variations. So there's a whole reason why it's time to get rid of this superwoman cloak. And actually, I mentioned this in a conference. I was talking about the imposter syndrome, and I was invited to attend a Women of Colour conference, and I ran 2 workshops. And in that, I said that I am perfectly imperfect. And that's a big deal for me to say that, because much of my life I wanted to be perfect. But now I'm happy being perfectly imperfect and embracing all of me. I'm not part of me, hiding parts of me under a cloak. And as I've done that in the book, I talk about the leadership journeys and the shock and surprise at being appointed into senior roles. But actually, there are no surprises. When I've mapped out my own career journey, that's been through work, commitment, and dedication. But this imposter syndrome, I still couldn't believe when I'd actually been appointed for the work that I'd actually done and did a good job. The imposter syndrome still came up. And actually, Steph, I have a problem with the term imposter syndrome because it radicalizes it. So I'm twisting and turning with it. I use that because most people will recognize it, but the notion of syndrome as though it's a medical condition doesn't sit well with me. And again, I mentioned that in my book, but for the purpose of the book, I do talk about imposter syndrome and why is that? And we will have variations around that. In terms of sexual orientation, I think that's powerful. And again, how I was shaped by my family who came from Jamaica and the laws and their experiences, and then coming here and how I would hear conversations about people who were different, of that I've chosen to take a different path to life. And again, because I'm passionate about mental health, which is why I chose to be a governor in a mental health trust. Those things are powerful, and it's embracing the whole self. If I can embrace the whole self, this is a piece of humanitarian work. It's a piece of humanitarian work in my own house.
Yeah, and Beverley, I mean, there's so much there in what you said that I want to unpack. I'm going to do a very quick advert because you mentioned Trauma Informed, and we do have another event. Because it's Black History Month, I thought I'll do 2. But so we have another event on the 24th of October about trauma and trauma-informed organisations. So people can book onto that now, but I'll mention that again later. I think imposter syndrome, really, really interesting. And I did a talk last week, and there was someone there that had never heard the term before, a woman that had never heard the term before, but it described exactly what she was doing. So I think it's always worthwhile just mentioning imposter syndrome is that feeling of self-doubt, the feeling that you don't belong somewhere, and that you're going to get found out at any moment. So you're an imposter and you're going to get found out at any moment. And I would completely agree with you. What I normally say now, because I used to talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and I normally say now, yes, it is something that's internal. It's a feeling. But the reason that women so often get it and people of colour so often get it is because there are lots of messages out there that are basically telling us to sit down, be quiet, don't brag, and that we don't fit in and that we don't belong. So is it any wonder that we then don't talk about our achievements and think we don't belong, we don't fit in, especially when you're talking about positions of power? And I was just talking to a white woman a few weeks ago who was basically saying she has had it said to her face that this type of job should be done by a man. And you kind of go, really? It's 2023, but it's still happening. So sometimes it's internal because of the message that we hear, but sometimes actually when we get that feeling that we're not welcome here, it's because we're not welcome there. So I always say, don't beat yourself up because you've got imposter syndrome. It's done to us, but there are ways to get over it. And I think that the last thing within what you were talking about that I'd just like to kind of unpick a little bit more is this experience of, because you felt that you had to fit in to succeed, that you cloaked yourself, and that idea of throwing a cape around yourself. I have something similar, and I talk about when I went into like my first more senior position in the ambulance service, and I tried to dress and look like a white middle-aged man. And strangely enough, I wasn't very successful at that, but I wore dark suits, I wore white shirts, I didn't wear makeup, I didn't really wear jewelry, I had my hair tied back, and I straightened it. I straightened my hair for decades. And that decision, when you take that decision of, you know what, I'm going to go into work with curly hair. Oh, the fear that I felt of people, nobody's going to respect me. And so I really understand that. I mean, what was it with you that just, you were talking about during lockdown, what was it you just went, you know what, because, for anybody that can't see Beverley and listening on the podcast, you've got a fantastically coloured top on, really love design, you've got beads, you've got fantastic curly hair, big earrings, you look wonderful, but I dare say that's not the professional. And did you have a professional you and a home you?
Totally, yes, Steph. You found me out. Yeah, I almost had two wardrobes. At the weekend. Yes, I wear lots of head wraps and African cultural dress wear, and then in work it's a corporate look, and it reminds me of, and again I refer to this in one of the chapters in the book around my appointments into category B men's prison to deliver on diversity after the untimely murder of the Muslim teenager Zaid Mubarak. And I remember that because that was a critical time for me in terms of identity, because we talk about how you shared your example there, and I believe that I became hypermasculine in a men's prison. A woman leading 6'3" white men, race equality officer, foreign national officer, disability officer, the prison regime, all those walking on wings. So I didn't feel it was picked up by friends outside of work, and they asked me, "What's happened to you, Beverley? I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same person." And I didn't realise. But it was picked up by friends that I had changed so much. But I think that was probably another cloak of somebody working within that system, challenging outdated behaviours, and also working in a prison where the prison population was 30% who looked like me, who were black as well. So there's a number of levels. And again, when I go back to being trauma-informed, perhaps under that cloak, there was a lot of stuff going on for me. But as a leader, I continued to do what I was advised to do, be part of the strategic team, all those things. But my true identity was never, ever revealed.
Yeah, and that thing that you said about the creativity. So actually, from an employer perspective, if that's the way that people feel that they've got to look and behave a certain way, you're getting a tiny part of that person, and that person's putting so much effort into being that, and you're missing out on the richness that is you. Your employers missed out on all of that because the environment that you were working in was making you behave, be somebody that you're not, or even just a small part of who you were.
It's also right, Steph, and that's why in my coaching practice, I'm a big fan of taking a strength-based approach. I'm not here as what you don't have, but I'm wanting as a transformational leadership coach is to bring out your positives or work with. Let's work with what you've got. Let's use that as a baseline. So it's important to look at strengths. And I do that. I coach myself. Okay, Beverley, what are your strengths? Let's use that and turn the mindset away from the negativities and using that as a starting point to build somebody up. And I think that's super important in terms of systems not recognizing or only getting a slice of the wonderful talent of our women of colour. There's something about a sense of belonging. If you feel that you belong within the system, within your team, within a group, you are going to bring your best self. You're going to bring your A game, 101. You're going to bring your A game and you're going to do the best, the same as everybody else. And what I found, unfortunately, with many coachees is that there is a fear base in some instances across different systems of bringing their whole self to work, a fear. And also with that fear is there's no role model who they can look up to. So they're the first. And maybe when I think about my own career, in many ways, I've been the first in many areas, like the first senior woman to work in that prison. The first to do many things, and I haven't thought twice about it. So there's something about taking risk, but equally Brené Brown talks about taking that risk, and it's a form of liberation. So every time I do this, like the first time I'm doing a live today, I see that as a form of liberation, freeing myself and liberating myself. So I think it's quite powerful to take the risk. But also, I would suggest, or as a tip, is to have somebody running alongside with you, travel alongside with you, if that's a coach or somebody who understands from the lens of Blackness or understands diversity. Make sure you've got someone to ride along with you, but take that risk and live. So taking away this care, I'm living my best life to the best ability that I can.
And I think, that thing of being the first and you being very open, speaking out, the book that's going to come out, you are really kind of blazing that trail. And how does that feel? Because being the first, I agree, it could be really liberating. It can also be really challenging. And I often see people not recognizing that they are in that really trailblazing position. So what's that like for you?
I don't tend to think about that at the moment. I tend to think about this is something that I would like to do. I ask myself the why. So we'll think about Simon Sinek, the why, the what, the how. Ask myself those questions. I did mention at the beginning of this conversation, when I took away the cloak, I knew that this work was deep work that was coming up. So whilst I was a trailblazer in those areas, I also need to make sure that I have somebody who's riding alongside with me. I think that's super important. One of the mistakes, or not a mistake, when I think about my early years as a senior manager in a prison, so I didn't have anybody riding alongside me. I was going off theory. So I had academic capabilities, I had leadership and management capabilities, but the emotional piece and the impact of stories that you would hear or working with some very dangerous people, that was in a cloak. That was all under a cloak. So I think when you think about breaking new ground, it's important that you think about, well, who do I need around me? I need a team of people around me. If it's a mentor, if it's an ally or whoever. So I ensure on this leg of my journey, I have a book mentor. I have a variety of good people who get me, who understand the Black body, who understand trauma, impact, all those things, and help along that journey. I'm also more focused, and I know I've referred to this in our conversation, Steph, around self-care, because when I think about my family and others or women of colour and the hustle culture, there are two schools of thought of this. So I hear and see lots of women of colour who are in the hustle culture, great. And there are some people who are saying, actually, I've done enough of that. And maybe it's because I'm at an age where I'm saying, no more. So I'm a big fan of the work by Trisha Hersey, who talks about the nap ministry. Taking time to nap and not feeling guilty. I could never do that because I never saw it. I never saw it in my grandmother. I never saw it in my mother's. I never saw it in my auntie. There was always something to do. And maybe sometimes I think that could be running on trauma. So if you stop, you have to think about things. So it could be a school of thought. It could be running on trauma and keep going to the detriment of health. And particularly,
I also think there's something as well about if you're busy and you're going the whole time. I think absolutely right. It means you're not looking at other stuff, but also to put that imposter syndrome lens on there as well. In the West, busy equals successful. So I remember I left the NHS. I went to a colleague's funeral and I bumped into loads of former colleagues, and I kind of went, "How are you doing?" And they all went, "Oh, busy. Oh, it's manic. Oh," and I was like, "You're making me really depressed," because I was like, people asked me, and I would say, "Oh, great, I'm really enjoying the job and it's fantastic." And I had started to do this work that you're talking about and shedding a lot of that starting to set fire to my cloak. And so I think this thing of the hustle 24/7, it's about this, well, I'm hustling, so therefore I'm worthy. Whereas actually, I'm with you. I'd much rather have a nap because I know I'll be far more effective if I take care of myself.
Totally. Yeah. There's something about giving yourself permission. That's one of the things that I've learned, and I talk about this again in my book, about giving yourself permission to do nothing. And now if people say, "What did you do at the weekend?" On Sunday, I did nothing. Or the most I may do is I've gone out for a 3-4 hour walk, but I've done nothing, and I've given myself permission. And what I've learned is, Steph, when I give myself permission, it's okay. But if I don't give myself permission, it's that imposter. What are you doing? Sat down, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But I've got into the mindset where I give myself permission to be. Give myself permission to be. The NAP ministry talks about that a lot and talks about our ancestors. So again, the ancestry piece for me is super important because they were driven by work. When I think about slavery, you couldn't have a rest. You had to eat or whatever, if you had food, to work on the plantation and all the rest of it. So it's born in me through ancestry, through family, through mother, from her womb of trauma or whatever, through me. So I've had to rewire my thinking and my mindset, and this is where I am today. So I'm on the journey. I'm partway through the journey. I'm really enjoying it and getting creative. So I'm really enjoying the book and writing in the book as well.
Right. So some of the people that are listening to this will not be Black women or women of colour. Some of them will not be women. What is it they can take away? How can they help? Because we've talked a little bit about that, feeling safe to be yourself and things like that. What would be your kind of tips for change agents who are going to help and walk alongside us?
Yeah, I think there is certainly something about anybody who's on this line is to do the work, because the worst thing that can happen is asking somebody all these questions. The information is out there. So to get involved in doing the work, to listen or hold space for colleagues, Brené Brown talks about sitting with discomfort. This stuff can be uncomfortable, because when somebody throws away the cloak and then they suddenly want to talk about something, it may come up in so many different ways. And yet this narrative around a Black woman being aggressive, assertive. So I would invite anybody who's in this space to listen, hold space, listen without judgment, and work towards a collective sense of belonging for everybody, a collective sense of belonging. And I think it's just step by step with that. There's something about trust. So we will always look at, I can't speak on behalf of every woman of colour, but psychological safety is powerful. So to enable a sense of belonging, to enable someone to come out at work and be their true self, to contribute, is incumbent on whoever's holding that space to recognise psychological safety and the importance of that. Yeah. I think that would be the starting point.
And I think that thing about discomfort, and we've had a few guests over the kind of year and a half, whatever, that would be doing this now, who have talked about sitting with that discomfort. And it's something that I like to talk about a lot of. People, perhaps of all the protected characteristics, which is a term I also hate, by the way, but find ethnicity and race really difficult to talk about, and if they are not from the global majority. So white people tend to feel really uncomfortable in this space and talking about this stuff. And that process that goes on when somebody says something about their experience as a person of colour, that triggers that, so are you saying I'm racist, can be really, really difficult. And actually, the thing that I find is that people go into this internal discussion about this person saying I'm racist. I'm not racist. I wouldn't be. I'm a nice person. I'm a good person. There's a fantastic, I wish I could remember who it's with, but Brené Brown does do a fantastic interview with a black woman about that, and about how actually you become obsessed with yourself instead of listening to what the individual's talking about. I would also say, though, yeah, you might be. You might have racist or prejudiced thoughts. I have biases and prejudices. I'm really aware what they are, and therefore I take action to make sure that my biases don't impact on my behavior and my choices. So if somebody's saying, oh, that they don't, I don't believe them. So it's okay. It's okay if you've got those biases. It's not okay to act on them. But have that discomfort and really, outside of that conversation, think about what is it that made you feel uncomfortable. I think that's a really important piece of work for people to do. Why did I feel uncomfortable? What was it? What buttons were they pressing that meant I felt so uncomfortable?
Yeah, it's like a self-inquiry. Because taking that self-inquiry, what is it? And also, Resmaa Menakem talks about how does it feel in the body? Because quite often, many people can read about it. You can read about it and be theoretical, so it's all in the head. But it's important to feel it, sit with it. How does that feel? And undertake that self-inquiry. Why do I feel uncomfortable? What is it about that? I'd also probably invite people who are listening in, without it being performative, and if you don't already, is to have a diverse community of friends. Many people will probably have one community of friends. I think that's the best way that we can learn. However, it's not to say that one person's view, so the view of Beverley Powell, is therefore the view of every black woman. You know, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the author, talks about the danger of the single story. So everybody...
I have a black friend and they don't mind.
Yeah. Everybody has there's a different story. So there's a danger of that. But I'd invite people to broaden your community, your diversity of your community, and probably just have those friendships and get those understandings. Not an interview sort of friendship, but broaden community. Get to understand these matters and understand it, because the danger often is where if you are not from that particular group, that community group, you won't say anything. And how can we get to have dialogue when we're fearful of each other? We have many commonalities, and it's the differences that divide us, in my view.
Yeah. And Ngozi Cole, who did our Power and Privilege event that you can kind of listen to or watch online, she introduced me to a really interesting exercise where you sit and you take your family out of it, so family doesn't count, but you sit and you think of the 5 people that you are closest to or you come into contact with most, and you do kind of what gender are they, what ethnicity are they, what age are they, what social background do they come from. And I did it for 5 and then I expanded it. And what I found really interesting was I have different people of different sexualities, people of different sexual orientations. I have people who are different ages, different ethnicities, but mainly female. I have very few male friends in my social group. Now I know why that is, and I'm not going to go into why it is, but I know why that is. But it made me think I really need to expand this so I have more male influence around me that's not work.
Totally. Yeah. I've undertaken that exercise and have a diverse range, and I've often wondered how come I've got a diverse range of friends. And maybe it's because they are othered or they identify as others, so we have commonalities and not differences. So maybe it's that. But I think it's a really good exercise and something as part of a self-inquiry around this work, and then to really understand the issue. So I'd be saying, move out of the theoretical stuff, drop down into the heart, feel things, ask, remain curious, stay out of judgment, remain curious, and those questions around, what does a sense of belonging mean to you? Mm-hmm. Being in this space, me here, presenting my full self, all those things, and have those questions. It's the simple conversations and the simple acts that can help bring people, communities together.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a minute just for some tips on how to do this, how to start burning that cape. But if anybody's got any questions, you can either pop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can bring you in, or comments. It doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment. So please feel free to do that if you'd like to. But come on then, Beverley, while we're waiting for people to come up with some questions, what would be your tips for getting started on this journey? Other than the self-care, I think the self-care is really important. It's really important in every part of life.
Yeah, sure, Steph. So I think as it's Black History Month and the theme is around women of colour, I'd invite everybody who's online to follow somebody who you're not following who is of colour, women of colour. Look at what they have to say. Look at their thoughts, their insights. Have a read of that. Follow. If anybody isn't reading any books, I would start to look at engaging in one of the books, maybe one of the books that I've wrote. But equally, it's important to read books which are contrary to your thought processes as well. So you can formulate that critical thinking and those arguments for and against. So one, I would recommend follow somebody who you don't follow already and support them. Mm-hmm. It's a tough gig out there for women of colour. Read and I think just keep it simple and then move on from that and be curious. Be curious.
And I would say for people who are readers, podcasts are a great one. Really, really good, because I listen to podcasts all the time in the car. So it's that when I read, I tend to read to relax. So I read rubbish. But when it comes to either audiobooks or podcasts, I really like, and I listen to them when I'm in the car. And that's my way of getting that knowledge transfer.
Sure. One of the audio books that I would recommend, or that I'm part way through, is The Nap Ministry by Tricia Hersey. Who's talking about having rest and wise. That's great. When I'm in a coffee shop, I'll just put that on and listen to the Nap Ministry and get creative. I don't know if not everybody's a fan of journaling, and you don't have to write, you can draw, but get creative. So often in the corporate world, we're busy doing reports or corporate emails. Get creative and go with what your heart says. This is not woo-woo stuff, but get creative. Write it out without any fools. Just write it all out and read it back. So get creative, I would suggest as well.
Yeah. And that creativity can come in all different types of ways, because, people say to me, draw. And it's like, no, really, my sister's fantastic at art. I'm not. But actually, so for me, it's movement. And sometimes actually just in, I think this is one of the things with movement. People think you have to do dance steps. You don't. Sometimes just put the music on and dancing in the kitchen like you don't care. The kind of emotion and stuff that can get going when you genuinely just move is great. So I think whatever's your thing, do it, and do it without worrying about what people are going to think about it.
Steph, you must be watching me. You must be watching me in my kitchen.
I love sticking a playlist on and seeing where the music takes me. It's great.
Full confession, I bought a tambourine 2 weeks ago. And sometimes when I get into hearing a song that I like in the kitchen, thank goodness the neighbours aren't proximity away, I get the tambourine. And maybe it's a little girl who used to have the tambourine when she's at church, but when I feel it, it's the noise and it's the movement for me and just getting the energy going. So it's not sort of intentional. If I feel that, the tambourine's in the living room, grab the tambourine.
Yeah, but I do think people are far too worried about doing the right steps. And I say this as a dance teacher, that's not important at all. The right steps are not the right steps. The right steps
the energy, the vibe, the lymph system, get it moving, particularly as we're hybrid working. Lots of us are sat there for hours. So yes, we can go and have a walk, but do something different. Get the energy moving.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think, that thing of, it's a very similar thing when you say about journaling and things, just sitting and writing, not editing it, just writing and just seeing. And I have done that occasionally and been really quite shocked by what I've ended up writing, because one thought triggers another thought triggers another thought. And I've gone, oh, I didn't realize that was going to come out at all. So, yeah.
It's totally, when I'm in nature, my freshest thinking, strangely enough, comes when I'm in nature. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday. They said their freshest thinking comes to them when they're in water or by water. So it's whatever switches your tap on, works.
Brilliant. So we've got a couple of minutes left now. And I am just going to really quickly tell you about our next event. So we've got... we have Black All Year Unlocking Compassion, Trauma-Informed Organisations, which is I didn't actually, I could say, claim this is all by design. I didn't realise how relevant these two sessions were going to be together in October, but they really are. So if you can join on the 24th of October, come along. It will be recorded. It will be available on YouTube and as a podcast. And the link is in the chat to book for that. But in November, we've got a session on internalized oppression. And that, when we sometimes wonder how people can say what they say about people of colour when they are people of colour themselves, I'm not going to mention politicians, that's going to really look at that and help us unpick that and actually how to work through it and get past that. So that, both of those sessions I hope will be as informative and as useful as this one has been. So, Beverley, it has been fantastic. I want to know, now that you've kind of got rid of that cape, is it completely gone? Does it still keep popping
totally off?
So what does that feel like now it's gone?
Oh, Steph, it's strange, but I feel lighter. I feel more in touch with my emotions. And strangely enough, I feel more emotional. And I don't think that's anything. I'm past menopause. But however, I feel more in touch with things. I feel more, things touch me more, which wouldn't have done previously. And probably I would mask it. I did talk about numbing down feelings. So I feel lighter. I feel more in touch with me. And it's sort of the little girl and Beverley are now connected. I've rescued Beverley. And I think that's important for me, for my story, that I have rescued Beverley. It's okay, and we're together. So, it feels great. Great.
And, I love that, because I think there is something. I've got a picture of me when I was about 7 or 8, and I'm away with the Brownie Guides and on pack holiday, and I've got an apron around the middle, and I'm doing a ballet dance in front of everybody. And to me, I might actually be a little bit old, I might be the 8 or 9, but to me, that is this confident, bright girl who thought she was going to run the world. And somewhere between 8 and about 11, 12, certainly 13, she started to diminish. That cloak started to come on. And that idea of me now going back and kind of holding that me when I was young is just fantastic. I love some of your imagery. It's brilliant. I'm going to pinch it all. But yeah, that, you know, and I think there's that thing of, if you're younger, not having to go through what we've gone through, and not letting that cape get so big and so heavy. But if you are of a certain age, or, you know, it's not too late. It's not too late to shed that. So thank you so much, Beverley. You know, it really has been fantastic. And I knew it was going to be a good one, and you haven't let me down. I just want to say to people, obviously, we've got the events coming up. But if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please like and subscribe to make sure that you see our future events. And it also helps others to find this stuff too. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your attention. Thank you, Beverley. It's been absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure we will catch up online soon. So take care, everybody. Bye.